G'day. A few episodes ago I did a couple of videos on fixing this up, mainly cleaning it up and making a replacement part and painting it and that sort of thing. A friend of mine saw that and said, I'm missing this bit on mine, can you make me one? And so I did. But even though it's a small part, you think, 3 bits, how hard can it be? It actually did have a few twists and turns in it. So come along for the story. In there I do a little bit of straight knurling and explain some of the ways I do that, and had to reduce some stuff down in thickness. One of the first things I have to do is get some material to suit. Now that's around about 70 long around there, and it's 20 wide, and that's fine, but it's 1.4 thick. I haven't got 1.4. I'm not even sure whether 1.4 is a standard size here in Australia. Possibly in Japan where this was made it is, but here it's not. I do have some 2mm. So I'm going to try and machine that down. Because it's stainless, it's austenitic, I can't put on the grinder and hold it down on the magnetic chuck. I'm going to have to clamp it here to the bed of the mill. But machining this down causes a few problems. Because it's stainless, it'll heat up. It won't dissipate the heat easily. So that's one of the reasons I want to keep it clamped firmly to the bed here to try and get the cast iron to suck out some heat. I need to use a sharp cutter because if it's blunt and it starts rubbing, I've got work hardening happening. It's also increased the temperature. And with something like this, if you have, say, a hot spot just there, it's going to buckle up, right? So I need to keep this as cool as I can. I'll be flooding it with coolant. I'll have it strapped down as much as I can, all to try and just, keep that under control, keep that that material so it doesn't want to buckle and warp. I'll be taking 0.6 off, but I'll be sort of taking it off in thin slices, so I'm not adding lots and lots of heat and not all that sort of thing, right? So this is actually one of the trickier parts of this build, because the rest of it is, when you think about it, I just cut it to size, fold it, make up a little bit in there and attach that, turn up a knob. That's the easy part. Bit of a summary of where I am. I've taken that down and mixed success. I've got 1.35 and a 1.45, so something, on average I'm about 1.4, which is good. There was a low spot on the corner, and that happens. Sometimes the corners just sort of kick up a little bit, and so rather than taking it from the edge in, I actually stepped in a little bit and trimmed the edge off, and that got rid of that. And I'm still over length, so I'll be just adjusting, where I take the part from to maximise my uniformity of thickness. I need to give that a bit of a scuff. I did, where was that? That was about there somewhere, I think. Yes, there. So that was the bit that I clamped down. I've trimmed off, as I said, trimmed off the edge, cut down there with a hacksaw, minimised the heat input, and so I've pretty much got a blank here which I can use to fold and make up the majority of that clamp. I have a problem. This particular bend here I could get reasonably sharp. I had a 90-degree bend, and then I gave it a bit of a thump with a hammer on a sharp corner, and I got a square corner. Now, I need that square corner because the part that goes into this clamp has square corners. If I have a radius there, it's not going to sit accurately. My finger bender isn't good enough to give me that square corner, so I've had to use the bending pliers of last resort. They enabled me to get in there and put that bend in, but now I've got to square that up. So what I'm going to do is, I've got a bit of material here which just happens to be 9mm, it's out of the scrap pile. I'm going to clamp that in the vise, and I'm going to support that underneath, and then I'm going to thump that with a hammer and upset that around the corner. And I owe thanks to Dave at Ingles Coachworks for this, because he enlightened me about upsetting metal to get a nice square corner. So I'm going to do that and get a square corner. Then it's relatively downhill. That copper slipper is just bent, and then there's a copper block in there, a steel block in there, which from the appearance of these pins looks like it's riveted in. I might just drill a hole, I think, and put a couple of puddles of weld there. Moving on a little bit, this is the part well, let's call it the lozenge because it looks something like that. That sits inside here. There's a tapped hole that goes through for the clamp screw, and it's this shape because it's basically got a cradleless copper slipper, and that's not a difficult thing. So part of that is just to let the thing get on, but also part of it is relief for the internal corners there. I've drilled some 3mm holes in here. As I said, the original was riveted, but I'm not going to go that route. So I've got a stack of odds and sods there, which I'll just put in there, put that in so, clamp it, weld it, and then dress it back. I've left the ends a little bit long. I figure that it's easier to dress those back a little bit when needed, and also there's the problem of if the weld gets too close to the edge, then it burns away. So that'll just be a few dots of stainless welding. I've plug welded through and dressed back and overall shaped that, and it's not looking too bad. A bit more polish there. You can just pick where the welds are, but that should be good. I've tapped the top here for an M3. Being Mitutoyo, it'd be metric, so that's what I'm guessing that is. I can't actually measure it. It doesn't stick out enough either way, but it looks like it's about an M3, so that's all right. So drilled and tapped that. I'm now going to make up the slipper piece here. I've just got a strip of copper. I happened to find some that was some of the stuff that my uncle gave me, so thank you for that. And it's just this stuff is very soft, so it's just a matter with the pliers of bending up in the right spot to make that shape, which will then clip in over the top like that. That didn't take too long to do. There's the copy, there's the original, and they're pretty much size for size. I've sung the praises of these things before. They're not sponsored, but they really are wonderful things, especially for doing this sort of thing. With the parallel grip, you can bend around that, and they're also very good at straightening because of the force that this arrangement develops. If you put a bend in the wrong spot, taking it out and putting it back in isn't a problem. It just does it. So there we go. So that's that done. All I need to do now is make up the knurled screw for that. The last thing I need to do on this clamp piece is make up the screw. Now the screw itself isn't all that complicated. It's an M3, 15 long with the 6mm straight knurled head. Some people get into a bit of strife with doing the knurling, so I thought I'd run through a little bit of what I do with this. This is a straight knurl. There's also a diamond knurl which has got the crisscross pattern, and usually you do that with a scissor knurler. Knurls can be cut too, by the way, rather than having the material crushed. But what you've got to think about is that when you're pushing the knurl into the material, whether clamping with the scissor or pushing into it, the material that is being displaced has got to go into the tip of the knurl, as in if you think about the knurl having a series of peaks and troughs, the material that the peak is pushing out the way has to go into the trough. If you don't get that moving into that, then you're going to get an underformed knurl. If you get too much of that, the material's got nowhere to go, it starts flaking off and looks terrible. So knurling is one of those things that I usually do by feel, and after a bit of practice you can work out when it starts getting a little bit stiffer, and practice, and you can feel just at the start of that. Now the knurl on here, the knurls I've got there's several sizes, and mine are in TPI, so I'm using a thread gauge, and this seems to be a 40 TPI knurl, and I can do that on a straight knurl. So I happen to have a 40 TPI knurl wheel, so I'll set this up and basically push into that. Now with a straight knurl like this, you just push. I don't like pushing the whole lot, so I'll start at one edge, start my knurl forming, and then feed across just by hand until I get the knurl I'm chasing. With a I mean, you can do the same thing with a diamond knurl, and if you've got a long portion of knurl, that's what you usually do, is you start in one place and then you feed along. But it's a matter of getting that depth of cut, shall we say, or depth of crush just right, so that you get the nicely formed knurl without the excesses or without the flat spots. Now once I finish the knurl, I'll come in with a tipped tool, usually a 45-degree tool, and just put a slight chamfer on the edges there. I may also get a bit of emery or a file and just run across the top of the knurl and just take the crests off, because sometimes when you've got a really sharp knurl it feels uncomfortable, and so just having a slight rounding of those crests, flattening of those crests, just makes it feel a bit nicer. Here's my part with the knob in there, so straight knurled, plus thread on the shaft there, so it screws into the block. For those who were watching the knurling operation, yes, I did stop halfway through. You can do that to check how your knurl is forming. It may not be considered best practice, but you can do it as long as you don't disengage the wheel from the knurl. It'll pick straight back up where you were. So when you're sort of feeling your way with a new knurl, you know, that's certainly possible. However, there's my copy, and there's the original, so they look pretty much the same. The new one actually looks a little bit nicer. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you for the next one.